Hello and welcome to the NVR Podcast number 25. I'm Rachael Aylmer.
And I'm Peter Jakob.
And today we're talking about sending a signal, ?
Or two or three, ?
Or two or three question marks. So Peter, we were just talking and planning this session. Do you want to say a little bit more how we came to this topic?
Yeah, well, the other day I got an email from a colleague in Denmark, and I'll call her Sabina.
Uh-huh.
And Sabina is a psychologist who works with NVR. And she provides consultation to a residential home or group, with several kids, which is part of a larger residential organization in Copenhagen. And I'll say it's Copenhagen. It's actually another town. And it seemed from the email, it was quite a long email, that Sabina felt sort of in a quandary. And what she wrote was that the team felt after an assault, quite a serious assault, physical assault by one of the young men on a carer, that they need to send a signal to him. So after the assault, he ran away. He was found by the police and detained. When I say young man, he's about 15. Mm-hmm. And they felt for some reason that he needs to go into a secure unit. He needs to be detained in a secure unit for an indefinite period of time as a signal. And I got the sense that Sabina struggled with that. And Sabina wrote that she sort of gets the need to send a signal, but that she personally would opt for a very limited period of time in the secure unit for maybe 2 days. And also she would like to recommend that the team welcomes this young man, this boy, this teenager, back into the group warmly when he is released from the secure accommodation. Sabina also mentioned that there seems to be a clash in the culture of the organization. So the larger organization is very behaviorally oriented. They feel that one must respond to behavior problems, to aggression with consequences. And when young people behave well, they must be rewarded. And that care plans must be developed on the basis of those principles. And there is a sense that I gleaned from the email, rightly or wrongly, that perhaps some of the team members may feel the need to be seen to be tough by people in the larger organization, perhaps by more senior management. So that was the starting point. And I just felt it throws up so many important questions for not just our practice of NVR, but for nonviolence in general, and how different approaches and attitudes and beliefs about parenting shape feelings and decisions in different ways. I was just wondering, I mean, just from what I've said so far, because I wrote Sabina an email with loads of questions, but I just wonder what comes up in you so far. I was just curious to see to hear what your more sort of immediate feelings and responses might be.
I just, when somebody poses the word consequences, my brain interprets that as it's a punishment. I think there's this real crossover between how people interpret that, a consequence and a punishment. I think many caregivers want to punish the child for a wrongdoing. I think culturally that belief lies within. I think our dear esteemed colleague Tony Meehan talks a lot about schools having that blanket policy of consequences. Yeah. And actually, it's not a consequence; it's a punishment. A consequence sometimes is a natural thing. It's a result of a behaviour that has been harmful, that has harmed you or others, and there's a feeling, an emotional response to that. Consequences tend to be given in the form of a punishment. So if you do this, you will not go here. If you do something bad, then you'll be locked up for an indefinite period of time. I think
that's so much at the core of what I see here. And I was just thinking the other day I was speaking to a mother whose child used the C word. And this mother just felt at that moment she couldn't remain sitting with her child. You know? She was helping her child with homework or something like that. She just felt, this is hurtful, this is demeaning, and I don't want to be demeaned, but I also don't want to fight with you over it. I don't want to escalate. So she told her child, I'm unhappy with what you've just said to me, and I'm upset, and I can't finish the homework with you at this point. That to me is really a natural consequence, because she is responding by honoring her feelings without, she's remaining nonviolent because she's not trying to control her child. She's not retaliating. But she's also not allowing herself to be the victim of that kind of verbal abuse by just simply sticking around. That to me is very different from someone saying, right, you've called me this, and now I will put a consequence in place. And a consequence is that this week you don't get pocket money. Yeah? That's the consequence. And you're, as you said, that's a punishment. I'm doing something that aims to hurt the child, to act as a deterrent, perhaps. But
that'll learn you.
That'll learn you. Maybe also a motivation, an understandable motivation is, hey, you've just made me suffer. I'm just going to make you suffer a little bit, so that you know how it feels. But actually, then we are moving out of nonviolence and towards violence. And so, I mean, coming back to this situation of Sabina's, our colleagues, the signal, what is the signal? What are they signaling? Are they signaling that they can put and will put consequences in place? Is it signaling? What is the meaning? What do you want? What is the message you want to give when you send a signal?
That's just it. What is the message you want to give? And if we're working with clients, we're thinking about being the parent that you want to be. What response do you want to choose to have to that behaviour? And how can you maintain your non-violent position to resist that harmful word or that harmful behaviour? I think there's such a crossover between our systems. I've been delivering training week on, week off this year, and constantly, being in a room of newly trained NVR practitioners. And we always end up having a discussion somewhere along the line with somebody in the group about consequences. So where's the consequence? So this child has harmed its parent. There has to be a consequence. In other words, what they're saying is there has to be a punishment. There has to be a punishment.
So the consequence, there has to be a consequence. We must impose a consequence. Sounds very much like a taken for granted paradigm of parenting. Yeah. Almost as if there's no need to reflect upon that. Almost as if a consequence, if we have to impose a consequence, that is as natural as the air we breathe. As a given, an absolute given. So, and a signal, perhaps, if the message that the signal is meant to convey, if that message is we are prepared and able to impose consequences, to punish, then actually the signal is a threat, isn't it? And the punishment in the case of this young man or teenage boy, the punishment is exclusion.
Yeah.
And detention.
What he needs the most is to be included and accepted, and a sense of belonging so that he can thrive and regulate. Yeah, so, absolutely.
And you just said something about being the parent you want to be. And I was just putting myself in the shoes of a carer in the team. And I was just thinking of the different forces that are pulling on me. So there's perhaps maybe I'm upset about my colleague. I don't even know, was the colleague a man or woman? Was the colleague injured? I don't know that.
Yeah, hypothetical.
But just imagining, I'm upset about what was done to my colleague. Maybe I'm worried for myself, for my own safety. Maybe part of me really rebels at victimhood. I don't want to be victimized by this kid. Maybe I also feel for the kid and I get his needs. And then there's this thing about the wider organization and the culture that the nonviolent resistance culture or the new authority culture that we are developing in our team. It's not appreciated by those higher up. They think we're somehow softies who, or I think they think we're softies who kind of hop around on tippy toes, all touchy-feely. And I don't want to be perceived as that. I want us to be perceived as a team that can, come down hard on a young person if needs be, that, or maybe a team that can be decisive and maybe they don't think we can be strong. So all that kind of can make it difficult to really focus on what is the parent like that I want to be, or the caregiver. What is the caregiver like that I want to be in this specific situation?
Of course, all those contributions, we see it and hear about it in schools as well. A lot of the teachers perhaps are already parents. Maybe these carers are parents. How would they want their own child to be treated should this have happened to their child? And so those kind of crossovers between the system they work within the person that they already are, the parent that they might already be, how they want to be perceived. And that absolute, it's a grind, isn't it? You have to go with your employees, you have to go with the system, because that's your job and that's the umbrella of which you're working within. And I think it takes a lot to step out of that and think and be creative with new ideas, and to receive a young person, to rebel against those sort of consequential, punitive punishment responses. And how might it have been for that carer to say, hey, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this lad being locked up. How can we enable him to calm down, to regulate, and to be brought back into this environment with warmth and compassion?
Well, and I guess if we think of it as a task or a challenge, then the challenge to me for the people in the team seems to be to reconcile their determination not to be victims and their moral position against violence, to reconcile that with their caring position and their wish to care for this young man, and to support him in his need for belonging, which, because his sense of belonging is likely to be very, very fragile.
I mean, hearing you say all that, Peter, that it's such a no-brainer for me. It's just so obvious, the response of the caregivers to this young man, and how they can formulate, a position of strength around this kid and bring him back into the unit. It's just so obvious. But to so many people working within those systems who do respond violently with violence, the eye for an eye, the whole world will be blind.
Yeah.
Two wrongs don't make a right, as my mum always told me. Yeah, I think it's such a struggle.
I wrote an example from another residential service in my response to Sabina. And I told her what, in this particular service, colleagues had done under very similar circumstances. And in this service, there had been a young person who had very violently attacked a carer and actually injured the carer. And the carer gave up their job, decided not to come back. So it's really serious. And one of the things they did was they all came to work in black.
Yeah.
The carers came to work in black. The carers in the other homes came to work in black. The secretaries in the office of the organization, and the teachers in the school that's associated. And they didn't make a big thing of it. They just all wore black. And when this young person asked, why are you all wearing black clothes? They said, because our colleague, we've lost a colleague, and we grieve. And the young person just sort of went, uh-huh. And after about a week, the young person themselves started coming to school in black. Something had happened there. And I found, and they did other things as well in this case, but that was what they felt was the most important and the most significant thing they'd done. And I guess we can recognize a different kind of strength in that. It is not the strength that arises from punishment. It's a different kind of strength. And I guess it connects with what in NVR we call presence. But I'm not sure how one would explain that, and how people in this team would explain this to the senior management of their organization, how would they communicate to them that they can be strong in a different kind of way?
It's just understanding the concept of parental strength, carer strength, and understanding that sometimes strength could be seen as power. Power comes with control, and therefore I must control the child, and therefore that element of violence. But actually the strength that we're talking about is that agency, that depth, that persistence, that revisiting, that patience, all of those things that come within that strength, and how that can be communicated. I think people can grow that strength. I think once they're invited to that, people can grow that strength.
I'm thinking of strength that comes, because it was a demonstration, wasn't it? It was a ritual they created, and it was at the same time a demonstration. And it was a demonstration of the strength of feeling they had. So strength arising from showing and communicating the strength of feeling in a non-injurious way, and still, keeping the young person as part of we, and the young person actually reciprocated by becoming we, by wearing black as well. I mean, I was astounded when I heard that, but astounded in a real positive way. So, I mean, maybe people in the team can focus on acting in a way that makes them the parents or the carers they want to be. And instead of acting towards the young person in a way that is a signal to the management that they are strong in the way the management perhaps expects them to be strong, that they communicate directly with the management. If the culture of the organization were to allow that, that they communicate directly with the management about their own ideas of caregiver strength, so that they're freed up to be the carers they want to be.
Yeah, and it's a unified position, isn't it? That collective support network that's developed and thought for and planned. What happened in that residential home that you described was a protest, but it was a peaceful protest. And I think there's such a crossover in systems and for other people's thinking that protests have got to be violent, that responses need to be consequential, which have to be punitive. I think how there's a big shift culturally that needs to happen.
And of course, if strength is supposed to come from power that is dominating power, punitive power, how do you punish a young person who has been punished by life already so much?
Exactly.
If the aim is to send a signal, we can hurt you, and we can hurt you by exclusion, so you better not do this again. This young man has been hurt so much, I assume, that it simply won't work. And so it becomes meaningless almost.
It is meaningless.
Yeah. Well, Sabina has asked to listen to the podcast.
Hello, Sabina.
So, hi, Sabina. So we'll send Sabina the link later.
Okie dokie. Okay.
Okay. Do we need to summarize, or does our conversation just speak for itself?
I think it does. I think it does speak for itself. I think anyone listening will make sense of it as well in their own, interpret it in their own way. So yeah, I think we're done, Mr. Jakob.
Okay, good.
And it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from him.
Yes, goodbye from me too.
Ronnie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.